So you've talked about all these incredible topics that you write about, and you've also shared how you bring those conversations into your classroom. I want you to speak on just the power, importance, symbolism, whatever, of a Black woman who is controlling the conversation on these
Mm,
topics, whether it be sexuality, love, pleasure, relationships, or social action, the prison industrial complex.
I think it is very important for Black women, particularly, to constantly push back against erasure. Black women create so much culture, um, so much culture. When we look historically, whether we are talking and throughout the diaspora, right? Whether we are talking
Hmm.
about matriarchs in Africa, whether we're talking about, the marketplace, which women usually control on the continent, whether we're talking about how women, Black women come into community throughout the Caribbean with different susus and different things where we work together and build together, or whether we're talking about all of the many movements, human rights movements that we have seen, in the US, and how Black women have been, at the forefront of those, not always recognized. When we think about the Fannie Lou Hamers and the um, Ella Bakers and the Kathleen Collins, and I could go on and on and on. I
Right.
Barnett. Um, I think it is very important for Black women to continuously do the work to carve out space for themselves, and I think that it is important because it provides a model, right?
Hmm.
Of young women who are younger Black women who are trying to find their place in the world, trying to find their voice, trying to figure out what they believe in and what they don't. Um, it's one of the many reasons why I am so vocal about things like, oh, well, let's push back against societal norms and traditions and talk about, Black womanhood that is connected to our bodies and pleasure. Um, let's make sure that we are, I mean, shoot, closing the orgasm gap, that we're thinking about our pleasure in the midst of the pleasure of our partners. These are conversations that I wasn't having when I was growing up and moving into womanhood. Nobody was having these conversations with me, and nobody who looked like me were talking about these kinds of things.
Hmm.
And even in terms of um, being an activist, like I started out in Houston, back in the day with NBUF and other organizations, more than 20 years. I've been working with different organizations in Houston, um, trying to do community work. And, Black men were always at the center of conversations about what needed to be done in community. And Black men were also constantly seen as the leaders of those movements and those organizations. And so I think it is also important for me as a Black woman to step up and have these types of um, political conversations, have these types of conversations around organizing and activism, because otherwise we will continue to think that there are only men who are doing this work, and
Hmm.
that the issues that we face in our community really are only um, rooted in the struggles of Black men,
Hmm.
which is important, but Black women struggle in many of the same ways that Black men struggle. When we think about the prison industrial complex and representation, Black women are represented in these systems in the same ways that Black men are, but we never have conversations about Black women. So it's twofold. On one, I think that I show up as a model, which is important, right? To be able to see
Hmm.
someone who looks like you saying things that you're interested in hearing or that maybe you want to say. And then part two is an effort to combat erasure in these kinds of conversations. If we're talking about police brutality, we cannot, still in 2021 believe that only Black men face issues with police brutality,
Hmm.
right? We need to be able to bring full stories, complete stories when we are having these conversations. And I think as a Black woman, it's important for me to represent Black womanhood and the struggles of Black women as well.